Good evening. Welcome to Everyday Christway Evening Devotional Koinonia for July 12th, 2023. Let's take a look at the scripture for the day. I've decided not to look at Isaiah because I couldn't find the Robert Alter translation. So I'm just going to turn to Proverbs. And we will do a precious listening of Proverbs, chapter 9. So remember, with precious listening, what we want to do is lean in to the reading. And if you're an advanced student, you might want to think about focusing on some part of your body. Usually, I like what John Butler says, feet on the ground. So focus on the sensation of your feet touching the ground or touching the floor, and try to keep attention on that sensation as you listen and are concentrating as much as possible on the reading. Proverbs chapter 9. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her pillars, 7. She has slaughtered her meat, has mixed her wine, also laid out her table. She has sent out her young women, calls loud from the city heights. Whoever the dupe, let him turn aside here. The senseless, she said to him, come partake of my bread and drink the wine I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and stride on the way of discernment. Who reproves the scoffer takes on disgrace. Who rebukes the wicked is maimed. Rebuke not the scoffer lest he hate you. Rebuke the wise and he will love you. Give to the wise, he will get more wisdom. Inform the righteous, he will increase instruction. The beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord, and knowing the Holy One is discernment. For through me your days will be many, and the years of your life will increase. If you get wisdom, you get yourself wisdom, but if you scoff, you bear it alone. The foolish woman bustles about, gullibility, and she knows nothing of it. And she sits at the entrance of her house in a chair on the city's heights to call out to the wayfarers who go on straight paths. Whoever the dupe, let him turn aside here. And the senseless, she said to him, stolen waters are sweet, and a purloined bread is delicious. And he does not know that shades are there in the depths of Sheol, her guests. I'm going to stop there for now. Perhaps we'll pick it up again tomorrow evening. And before we go into the reading of Maurice Nicoll, Psychological Commentaries, I actually did want to say a prayer today to start us off on the right spiritual foot, as it were. So let's turn to the text that we'll be looking at and then lift up our minds to the gaze of the Holy Spirit. O heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasury of good gifts and giver of life, come and abide in us and cleanse us of all impurity and save our souls a good one. We're continuing our reading of Maurice Nicoll's commentaries on the psychological teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. We're reading from the letter called The Nap, Birdlip, Gloucestershire, 27th March, 1941. This is the letter to Bush, which we read the first 2 or 3 pages of in our orientation yesterday. So we're continuing on, page 3. Again, we want to engage in precious listening as we dive deep into these words, which will be the basis and inspiration for the exercise of the day. Feet on the ground. As was said, a man is born as essence, and this constitutes his real part, the part from which he can really grow and develop. But this part in him can only grow in a very small way. It has not the strength to grow by itself any further after, say, the age of 3 or 4 or 5. Let us call this the first stage of man. That is, the first stage of a man is pure essence, which by itself is capable of a certain amount of growth, but reaches a point very soon in which it can grow no further. I notice in some of the questions asked in your letter to me that this point about man has not been understood, so I'm going to repeat it again. As I said, this system teaches that the essence in a man can only grow in a very short way by itself. You have to try to see what I mean. People naturally think that growth and development in something continuous, or that it should be, is something continuous and that it should be. But here is this extraordinarily interesting idea taught by this system that this is not the case. Man's essence can only grow by itself unaided to a very small extent. And as such, a man is nothing but a little child. Now, in order for it to grow further, something must happen. Something must form in itself round essence, and this is called personality. Essence must become surrounded by something that is really foreign to itself, acquired from life, which enters through the senses. A little child must cease to be itself and become something different from itself. As you were told, the center of gravity of itself begins to pass from essence into personality. It learns of sorts of things, it imitates all sorts of things, and so on. The formation of personality around essence, which is necessary for the development of essence, can be called the second stage of man. But let us clearly understand what is meant here. The future development of essence depends on the formation of personality around it. If a very poor personality, a very weak personality is formed round it, there is very little to help further growth of essence, which we will speak of when we come to the third stage. In the second stage, the formation of personality is taking place, and, as was said, the richer the personality, the better. But I notice that some of you do not understand what is meant here. The reason why you do not understand what is meant here is because you do not see this extraordinary situation that man is in, namely, that a man cannot grow continuously from essence because essence is too weak to grow by itself. The further growth of essence depends, first of all, on the formation of personality. And the richer the personality, the better eventually for the growth of essence. But ordinarily speaking, the formation of personality is quite sufficient for the purposes of life. A man finds himself in a good position, able to deal with life through the formation of a rich personality in him. And if he is satisfied, he is, for all life purposes, adequate. But this work, this teaching, is about a further stage in man. And this stage I will call the third stage. You must understand that this work is not really about life. It is about something else that a man can begin to attempt quite apart from whether he is a successful politician, a famous scientist, or a well-respected butcher or baker or candlestick maker. This work starts from man as good householder, namely from a man who has developed personality and can deal with life in his own particular way, reasonably enough. That is to say, it starts from the level of good householder, which belongs to the second stage of man's development. This third stage is all concerned with a possible further development of essence, and that is why so many apparently paradoxical or at least strange things are said in the Gospels, such as are contained in the Sermon on the Mount about man. They are all to do with allowing essence to grow at the expense of personality. And this is the only way in which essence, which is too weak by itself to grow, can continue to develop. In this sense, personality, which is formed around essence, must be formed. In this sense, personality, which is formed around essence and must be formed around essence, becomes eventually, if this stage is entered upon, the very source from which essence can grow further. Let us suppose that personality is in a particular person very richly developed. He is then a rich man in the sense of the Gospels. He knows about everything. He is an important person, and so on. What is poor in him? What is poor in him is his essence. He is not yet a real man. What he does to acquire merit, or from fear of loss of honor or reputation, and so on. But he does nothing from himself, nothing from the love of doing it, quite apart from praise, authority, position, popularity, or any other gain in the eyes of the world. Suppose that this man feels in some way like the prodigal son, namely that he is eating nothing but husks. I mean simply that he may feel in himself very empty in spite of all his riches. He has got the finest house or jewels. He has got a well-known name. He has in some way got the better of everybody else. And yet he feels empty. Such a man is approaching the third possible stage of development. He has now reached a position in which his essence, namely his real part, can grow and thus replace his feeling of emptiness by a feeling of meaning. But in order to bring about in man this further development, he must begin, as it were, to sacrifice his personality and to go, in a sense, in the opposite direction to that in which he has gone up to now. In other words, a kind of reversal must take place in him, which is well expressed in the parable of the prodigal son. And unless we understand that this third stage is possible and leads to a man's real development, we will never understand what the Gospels are speaking about or what the system is speaking about. So I think I'm going to leave it there, and we'll continue page 4 tomorrow. But before we depart tonight, I would just like to mention that I'm going to be trying an exercise tomorrow, and I invite those listening to try it with me. So tomorrow, I'm simply going to begin the day by trying to do a body scan to sense my body, to get a felt sense of the different parts of the body, starting with my feet. So I'm going to bring attention to my feet and get a felt sense of them. I'm going to try to move that attention up through the ankles and the calves and the shins and the knees, up through the thighs and hips. Get a felt sense of what it's like to have a buttocks, a stomach, a dantian, solar plexus, chest and heart. Do a body scan now, starting with the left arm. Get a felt sense of what it's like to have a hand and a wrist, as if kind of a liquid is moving up through the forearm and the elbow and up through the upper arm. And then now do the same on the right arm. Get a sense that your attention is like a kind of liquid moving up through your fingers and hand and wrist, forearm, elbow. Really feel into your upper arm. Don't imagine it, but get a sensation of your shoulders, your back, neck. Really try to get a feel and a sensation of having a face, nose. What does it feel like? Where does your attention go when you try to feel your ears and your forehead and the top of your head? So in the morning, first thing in the morning, after praising God, of course, and thanking God for bringing your soul back into your body, try to get into your body with a felt sense of what that's like to have a body. Thank you for attending, and I hope to see you tomorrow.